What if everything you thought you knew about Jesus' presence was incomplete? Joel Goldsmith's teachings unveil a revolutionary understanding that could transform your spiritual journey. Prepare to discover the living, breathing essence of Christ in a way you've never imagined. All right, listen up, family. Let me tell you how Joel would often kick things off. He'd get real quiet, lean into that microphone, and instead of a bunch of hellos and how are yous, he'd hit you with a truth bomb so deep it'd make your soul sit up straight. He'd say something like, "I'm not here to talk about God. I'm here because God is here talking." Mick dropped before he even started. I taught that this living presence isn't something you beg for. It's what you are. Once you get quiet enough to let the false you, the one with all the problems and the past, fade out. Prayer ain't about asking. It's about listening until you hear that hum of the eternal, until you feel that rock-solid peace that don't have a reason. That's the Jesus activity. It's when you stop looking for a savior out there and realize the saving grace is operating as your own consciousness. So here's my question to you, and sit with this for a second. What if the whole point wasn't to believe in what he did then, but to witness what this presence is doing in your life today? What if the real miracle is waiting for you to just be still and know? If this hit different, if it made something in you click, don't just bounce. Smash that like button, drop a 777 in the comments if this truth resonates, and subscribe, because this ain't the end of the conversation. It's just the wake-up call. Let's dive deeper together. Peace. So when Joel hits us with that truth bomb, the Christ ain't a dude. It's a principle. He's flipping the whole script. He's taking what religion sold us, a personality, a historical figure to put on a pedestal, and he shatters that stained glass window. Because if Christ is just a guy, even a miraculous guy, then he's trapped in time. He's a memory. And worshipping a memory, fam, that's a dead-end street. It leaves you longing for something that's over, for a connection you can't really have. You're always on the outside looking back. But a principle, now, that's a game changer. A principle is a universal law. It's like gravity. It ain't picky. It don't care who you are, what you did, what you believe. It just is. It operates. The principle of mathematics doesn't stop working if you don't like numbers. The Christ principle, what Joel is pointing to, is the active, living, intelligent presence of God itself. It's the very substance of reality, the animating force of all being. Jesus of Nazareth wasn't the only one who touched this principle, but he was the master who embodied it so completely, so perfectly, that he became the transparent vehicle for it. He showed us the how-to. He was the living proof of what's possible for a human consciousness that yields itself entirely to this divine activity. See, we think Jesus was the Christ in some exclusive, one-and-done way. Joel says, hold up, Jesus revealed the Christ. He was the embodiment of the principle, so we could see it in action. He was like the ultimate scientist, demonstrating the law of divine love and life so clearly that we couldn't miss it. But the experiment wasn't locked in his lab. The lab is your own consciousness. The principle he tapped into is still humming, right here, right now. It's the law of harmony. It's the law of your true identity as a spiritual being. When you're sick, you're not suffering from a lack of Jesus the man. You're out of alignment with the Christ principle of wholeness that is your core. When you're in lack or fear, you're not being punished for not believing in a first-century prophet. You're just unaware of the Christ principle of infinite abundance that is the actual fabric of the universe. This is the unspoken truth. The church might have given you a statue to pray to. Joel gives you a law to practice, a truth to recognize. You don't worship the principle, you acknowledge it. You lean into it. You get your personal sense of me, with all its baggage, its history, its opinions, out of the way, and you let the principle do its thing. This shifts everything from a spiritual transaction. You pray, maybe you get a blessing, to a spiritual realization. You're not trying to get God's attention. You're waking up to the fact that you are already in the God principle, like a fish in the ocean. The fish doesn't pray for water. It just has to stop thrashing and realize it's surrounded, sustained, and moved by it. That's the Christ. It's not a distant figure to reach. It's the very water of spirit you're swimming in this very second. Your entire spiritual work is to quiet the thrashing of your mortal thoughts and feel the support of that ocean. That's when the healing happens. That's when the fear dissolves. Not because a guy in the past heard your prayer, but because you've consciously tuned yourself to the eternal, operational frequency of the divine. And that right there, that act of tuning in, of getting still, that's what brings us to the second bombshell. Your own consciousness is the upper room. Now, hang on, because this is where it gets real personal. We read the stories, right? The disciples, all huddled together in that upstairs room after the crucifixion, scared out of their minds, the world crashing down. And then, boom, the presence shows up, not as a ghost, but as a palpable, living piece that changed everything. We've been taught to see that as a one-time supernatural event in a specific geography. But Joel, he grabs that metaphor and turns it into a map for your inner world. He says that upper room wasn't a building in Jerusalem. It's a state of consciousness. It's that interior space you enter when you finally stop seeking outside, when you withdraw from the noise of the world, the opinions, the fears, the endless churn of problems, and you go inside. Your own awareness, when it's quieted, when it's turned away from the drama of the senses, becomes that sacred chamber. The walls of that room are the boundaries of your personal, limited thinking. And the miracle, the infilling of the Spirit, happens only when you consent to be in that space, to let those walls dissolve. Think about it. Where are you right now? You're sitting here, but your mind is probably racing. What's for dinner? That unpaid bill, that conversation that didn't go right. That's the lower room. That's the street level of human experience, chaotic and driven by affect. The upper room is accessed by the staircase of silence. It's the secret place within you that is never troubled, never in lack, never sick. It's the you that exists before the world told you who you were. It's pure awareness, untouched by the drama. And here's the kicker, that living presence, that Christ principle, it doesn't descend from the sky into your life. It unfolds from within that sanctuary of your own quieted mind. It was there all along, waiting for you to show up. So all this seeking, this begging God to come down and fix your situation, is like the disciples staring at the door, waiting for a knock. The revolution happens when you realize the guest is already in the house. In fact, the guest is the house. Your true consciousness, stripped of its frantic, ego-driven decorations, as is the dwelling place of the Most High. Your body isn't the temple, your awareness is. The work, then, isn't to build something new, but to clear out the clutter, to silence the committees of doubt and memory and fear that are having a loud meeting in your living room. When you get quiet, when you consent to just FB without an agenda, you ascend to that upper room. And in that stillness, you're not alone. You never were. The infilling is instantaneous because you've stopped blocking it with your own mental traffic. The peace that passes understanding isn't something you get. It's what you are when you stop being everything else. This is where prayer becomes listening. This is where you stop being a seeker and become a witness to what is. And that brings us to the natural, radical next step, the one that changes the entire game from spiritual labor to effortless grace. Prayer is listening, not begging. See, once you've touched that upper room of your own consciousness, the whole notion of prayer gets turned inside out. You realize all the words, the petitions, the tearful pleas you've sent heavenward were based on a fundamental misunderstanding. They came from the lower room, from the sense of being a separate, needy self shouting across a cosmic canyon to a distant God. That's not prayer. That's spiritual telemarketing, and nobody's picking up. Joel taught that true prayer is the art of divine listening. It's the conscious, deliberate quieting of your own voice, so the still, small voice of the Christ presence can be heard as the only voice. Think about it. If God is omniscience, all-knowing, then what intel are you going to give him? If God is omnipotence, all-power, then what weakness are you asking him to fix? If God is omnipresence, everywhere present, then where is he that you need to send a message? The old model of prayer collapses under the weight of its own logic. You're not informing the infinite. You're tuning into it. So you get still. You close the mental door on the chaos of the world, on the laundry list of wants and fears. You don't bring an agenda. You bring a surrender. You sit, not to talk, but to let the truth of your beings resonate. It's like dropping the chatter in a vast, silent cathedral, so you can finally hear the one pure, sustained note the building has been humming all along. That note is the I am. It's the living confirmation of presence, of peace, of power that isn't yours personally, but is yours by virtue of your being. This listening isn't passive, it's the most active receptivity there is. It's holding your consciousness still like a calm lake, so it can perfectly reflect the sky of spirit. No ripples of desire, no storms of anxiety. In that sacred silence, something miraculous happens. The problems, the diseases, the lacks you thought you needed to pray about begin to dissolve. Not because a hand reaches down from a cloud to fix them, but because in the light of this conscious oneness, they are revealed as illusions, shadows cast by your own belief in separation. They have no substance in the reality of the Christ principle. This listening prayer doesn't change God's mind. It changes your standpoint. It lifts you from the perspective of the problem to the perspective of the principle, where harmony is the only law. You don't receive an answer. You become aware of the answer that has always been. Healing isn't something that happens to the body, it's the harmony of your true being, recognized inwardly, naturally appearing outwardly as wholeness. So you stop begging for bread, and you realize you've been sitting at the feast the whole time, just with your eyes shut. Prayer is the act of opening them. And when you've opened your eyes at that feast, you look at the central story of the whole tradition with a completely new understanding. You see that the crucifixion was a divine demo for you now. It wasn't a tragedy to mourn or a historical debt paid on some celestial balance sheet. Joel taught us to see it as the ultimate, loving demonstration of a spiritual law so profound it shatters the human sense of life. They thought they were killing a man. They were actually illustrating, in the starkest terms possible, the total inability of the material world, with all its violence, its laws, its politics, its very substance, to touch or end the reality of the Christed being. The cross was the world's most powerful attempt to prove that the spiritual is subordinate to the physical. And the resurrection was God's gentle, infinite laugh in response. You can't kill what is already life itself. But here's why it's a demo for you, right this minute. That drama on Golgotha is playing out in your own consciousness every single day. The world, your own thoughts, your senses, they are constantly trying to crucify your true identity. They nail it down with labels. You are your past. You are your diagnosis. You are your bank account. You are your failures. The crown of thorns is the cruel, limiting belief that you are a mortal, separate from your source, struggling to survive. The crucifixion is the agony of believing that story, of feeling trapped in a material identity that suffers and dies. The demo shows you that this entire painful drama is a lie. Just as the physical world had no ultimate claim on Jesus, your problems, your sickness, your lack have no ultimate claim on the Christ, being that you are. The resurrection, then, isn't a past event you believe in. It's the present moment truth you live from. It's the dawning realization in the midst of your own personal crucifixions, the job loss, the heartbreak, or the bad news from the doctor, that this too is powerless before the Christ principle alive within you. Or your resurrection is the moment you stop identifying with the victim on the cross and realize you are the untouched, eternal spirit witnessing the scene. You rise above the tomb of mortal thinking. The stone isn't rolled away from a physical cave, it's rolled away from your own heart and mind, letting the light of your immortal self stream out, so you don't worship the cross. You understand it. You see it as the final, brutal exam the human sense of things had to offer, which the Christ passed perfectly, showing you the way. Your personal challenges are simply lesser exams. The same law applies. The world says, this problem is real and powerful. The Crucifixion demo says, watch what happens when something seemingly real and powerful meets the irreversible truth of spirit. It evaporates. It has to. Your work is to take your stand, here and now, not at the foot of the cross as a mourner, but in the truth of the empty tomb as a living witness. Every time you face a challenge, you're being invited to run the experiment again, to see if the problem can truly crucify the Christ of your being. And the demo has already proven the result. Running that experiment, standing in that truth of the empty tomb, forces a monumental shift in focus, a complete relocation of your spiritual address. It demands you realize, stop looking out there, the kingdom is within. This might be the hardest pill to swallow in the entire teaching, because we are wired for external seeking. We look for salvation in a church building, in a guru, in a sacred text, in a bank account, in a relationship. We scan the horizon for a sign, waiting for our ship to come in. Joel's message is a thunderclap. Your ship isn't coming in. It's already docked in the harbor of your own soul. You're just looking in the wrong direction. This kingdom isn't a physical territory or a heavenly destination after you die. That's the great postponement, the spiritual trap that keeps you striving and never arriving. The kingdom, as Jesus himself taught, is within you. It is the realm of spiritual consciousness, the government of divine harmony already established at the very core of your being. It is the operating system of your true self, where the Christ principle is the only law. Seeking it outside is like having a diamond in your pocket and begging for coins on the street. You already possess the incorruptible treasure. The chaos, the lack, the sickness, they aren't realities you need God to fix from the outside. They are the symptoms of you being turned inside out, of projecting your gaze outward and believing the shadows on the wall are the real show. Your entire life experience, then, is simply the outpicturing, the external projection of what you consciously or unconsciously acknowledge within this kingdom. If you're acknowledging lack and fear within your consciousness, you will see a world of scarcity. If you're acknowledging the living presence of infinite supply and perfect peace within, the outer scene must by spiritual law conform. It has no choice. The world doesn't give you conditions, your consciousness gives the world its conditions. This is why positive thinking fails. It's just trying to paste happy thoughts onto an outer problem. This goes deeper. It's about withdrawing your faith from the outer spectacle entirely and placing it firmly in the reality of the inner kingdom. You aren't trying to change the world. You are letting the unchanging harmony of the kingdom within this reformat your perception of the world. So the practice is one of radical inner attention. When a problem arises, you don't rush out to fight it. You retreat in. You go silent. You turn your back on the storm and face the altar of your own being. You ask not, God, fix this, but what is the truth of my being in this situation? What does the Christ consciousness know here? And you listen. You abide there, in that inner sanctum, until you feel the solid rock of a peace that has no external reason. You let that inner kingdom atmosphere become more real to you than the outer tempest. And as you do, something inevitable happens. The outer scene, having lost the fuel of your frantic belief, begins to reorganize. It has to. It was always just the echo. You've stopped shouting in the valley, so the echo fades. You've come home to the soundless source on the mountaintop of your own awareness. Coming home to that soundless source, abiding there until it becomes your only reality, leads us to the final, unshakable foundation of it all. What the living presence is the only reality, period. This is where the rubber meets the road in Joel's teaching. It's the line in the sand between a nice philosophy and a transformative, rock-bottom truth. Everything else, the problems, the history, the physical senses, the world news, even your own personal story, all of it is the endless, shifting content playing out on the screen. But the living presence is the screen itself. It is the only substantive reality, the one thing that is permanent, unchanging, and actually ever is. Your body, your circumstances, your thoughts, they are appearances, waves on the ocean. The presence is the ocean. To live from this knowing is to be spiritually sober, to have finally discerned the real from the illusory. This isn't a denial of human experience, it's a recontextualization of it. You don't ignore the pain in your body, you recognize that the pain is a sensation appearing within the infinite field of your spiritual being, which itself cannot be pained. You don't pretend the bill isn't due, you see the appearance of lack unfolding within the omnipresent reality of divine supply. The appearance as a kind of temporary dream-like reality, but it has no ultimate authority, no power to define or limit what you truly are. The second you grant the problem more reality than the presence, you've stepped back into the dream and given it your power. Your entire spiritual work becomes this gentle, relentless fidelity to the real. You are training yourself, moment by moment, to feel the solidity of the screen while the movie plays. This presence isn't a mood or an emotion. It's not a feeling that comes and goes. It is the very ground of being. It's what remains when every transient thing is stripped away, in your deepest silence, when you've let go of every thought about yourself. What's left? That what's left isn't a void, it's a palpable, intelligent, loving aliveness. It is consciousness. That is the living presence, and it is what you are at your core. Your personal sense of me is just a temporary character this presence is knowing itself through. The goal is not to destroy the character, but to have the character realize its true source and nature, to stop taking its own temporary script so damn seriously. When this realization clicks, fear becomes impossible. How can you fear a changing scene when you know yourself to be the unchanging reality upon which it appears? Lack becomes a laughable concept. How can you be lacking when you are one with the infinite substance that forms all things? Even death loses its sting, because you see it as merely the disappearance of a form within the eternal presence that can never disappear. This is the ultimate freedom Joel points to. It's not freedom from human experience, but freedom within it. You navigate the dream. But you are never again fooled into believing you are merely a character in it. You are the awake awareness, the living presence, dreaming the dream consciously. And in that knowing, every moment, no matter how mundane or challenging, becomes sacred, because it is all happening within the only thing that has ever been, or ever will be, the boundless, present, alive reality of God.